So originally this video was supposed to be a follow-up to last week's video where I talked about some of the types of games that I don't enjoy playing on the Steam Deck, and in turn just make a video about the games that I love to play on the Steam Deck. However, over the weekend my buddy Jake pulled me into playing Palworld with him over on his world, and ultimately I got completely sucked into the game, and after that brief co-op session, then I started my own world in Palworld, and I've been having an absolute blast with it so far. So I decided to adjust the course of releases over the next couple of weeks and to go ahead and just make a video about Palworld, but then also I wanted to talk about what endeared me to the game so much, so quickly, and I think it's probably endearing a lot of people to the game really quickly, but then also some concerns that I have, because I realized that title was a little bit ominous, talking about how, why I like Palworld so far, or, why I think it's okay for now. And that's really because, as an early access title, I think it's fair to expect some level of jank, right? Because it is a game that is clearly still in development. But at the same time, there are some design decisions about it that make me a little bit concerned moving forward for how the game's going to do long term. So before I get too far ahead of myself, let's just go ahead and start with what my experience was like, and then later on I'll talk about some of my hesitations or things that I'm not so hot on when it comes to Palworld, or at least, things that give me some cause for concern moving forward. But first, let's talk about the stuff that I did like about Palworld. For starters, Palworld is just a really easy game to just jump in and immediately start having fun with, especially if you're of the creative building slash crafting slash collecting constitution and enjoy having your brain peppered with just dozens of overlapping systems. If that sounds like something that you would consider to be a good time, then you're going to find a lot to love here. Because honestly, it's a whole lot more than just catching new pals. It's also base building and maintenance, hunting for materials, crafting with said materials, defending your base from pal raids, assigning pals to manual labor within your base and managing their living conditions, and beyond the basic survive with and catch critters parts of the experience, you've still got combat, dungeons, collectibles, hidden treasures, and probably a whole bunch of other elements that I've honestly only scratched the surface of. So yeah, in a nutshell, there's just a lot going on here, and while initially that level of complexity might be at least a little bit intimidating, I feel like Palworld does a really good job of balancing tutorializing against letting you get your hands dirty and just jump right into the action. Case in point, when my buddy Jake asked me to come over and play with him on his game, I was able to just immediately join his world and just get to work picking apart the game's systems and figuring out how it worked at my own pace. And in no time at all, even though I wasn't 100% sure what I was doing just yet, I was able to start doing basic tasks and also building structures within the base to make our life easier as we did things like farm berries, or just make sure that we had a fire to keep warm, or just gathering more resources like wood and stone so that I could better contribute to the base and how it was continuing to evolve. And honestly, that's really refreshing because anytime I fire up a co-op game in the modern age, I just assume there's going to be some level of tutorializing there that sort of gatekeeps and does not let me just immediately jump in with my friends and start having fun. I'm fairly certain whenever I see that a game has online co-op that I'm going to spend at least a half hour to an hour just coming to grips with systems or completing some mandatory tutorial mission before I can just jump in and play with my friends, but Palworld just lets you get right into the action, and I love that. And speaking of multiplayer, you can have up to 32 players on one server, and Palworld is fun if you're playing solo or with friends. Although I will say with the latter, it's kind of a bummer that you can't just immediately bring your higher level character over to one of your friends' bases and start helping out. If you join one of your friends' worlds, then immediately you're going to start at a level 1 character and just have to work your way up. I kind of understand why they did this, because I would imagine if you could just bring like a level 50 character with all of your building expertise and all the pals you've collected over into your friend's area, well, in that case then they probably wouldn't have a lot of incentive to just go ahead and level their way all the way to 50 and unlock all the different tech for the bases and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I kind of understand why they did it, but it is kind of a bummer jumping into a new world and having to start from scratch every time. But again, I assume that this would have broken the game's flow otherwise, so not really a huge deal breaker or anything, just something I did notice. But as far as those actual gameplay loops for Palworld go, at its core it is an open world survival crafting action adventure game with not Pokemon creatures, rather pals that will help you out along the way. They can be used to fight, they can do manual labor around your base, you can ride them at a certain point, or you can just sort of, carve them up for food, which kind of speaks to the darker, more sardonic tone of humor that is present in Palworld. And naturally, you can capture new pals, not with Pokeballs, but rather Pal Spheres. Again, not a Pokeball, it's just I really can't get over how shamelessly they've just sort of lifted a lot of the terminology with just the slightest of tweaks from the Pokemon universe to make this whole thing work, but hey, I'm not complaining, it's a fun game, it is a funny thing to notice. And all of this is done in service to exploring and unlocking the secrets of the Palpagos Islands where the whole adventure takes place. And while that sounds a little bit thin, I really didn't need a whole lot of backstory to really get invested in this world and start having a great time with it. And what's weird is typically games like this that try to do a little bit of everything don't tend to sit very well with me. I might get really excited initially, but then I'll find like one or two mechanics that just feel kind of like thin or bare bones, and then I sort of start to lose interest. Certain games like Rune Factory or My Time at Portia spring to mind, but surprisingly, none of Palworld's systems have really managed to dissuade me yet, and I'm still continuing to have a lot of fun with it. It's just a blast capturing up little helper buddies that do more than just battle or solve environmental puzzles, and actually do a pretty good job of keeping themselves maintained once you've unlocked enough base upgrades to keep them automatically fed and cared for. And I love that any pals you capture beyond your party limit in the wild just get automatically deposited back to your base so you can go manage them later on. That's super convenient and definitely a smart choice by the devs, because the last thing you want to do after you get the player's brain chemicals going with the joy of discovery is to smash all that hope by arbitrarily preventing them from capturing one because they were just already at little buddy maximum. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that every single one of the mechanics in Palworld hasn't been done better elsewhere, because taken individually, I've definitely seen games do certain parts of Palworld better than it does, whether that's Minecraft, Pokemon, No Man's Sky, or wherever. But taken as a whole, each of Palworld's mechanics is just fun and juicy enough to keep you locked in and still excited. And I think the secret sauce here is that no one mechanic ever gets overly complicated. Tying them all together to keep track of everything is a little overwhelming initially, but each system builds on the next fairly effortlessly, and it doesn't take long to hit the ground running. But as much as I like seeing the little pals that I've gathered just walking around my base doing menial tasks or defending me in battle while I pick away at foes from a distance, there are some concerns that I have about the longevity of Palworld. And the first thing that kind of concerns me is the multiplayer. It works well enough, but I'm also hoping that constantly creating new characters in each of your friends' worlds doesn't get obnoxious or create like these huge gaps between your abilities and your friends. I mean, naturally that's going to happen in a game that's centered so much on progression to some degree. I just hope it's not so pronounced that it discourages players from jumping in with friends and really just taking in the entire breadth of Palworld's offerings. And another multiplayer concern that I have about Palworld is I really hope that they smooth out crossplay. As it stands, if you're playing on the Xbox, if you're playing like the Games for Windows version of Palworld and you buy it through the Microsoft Marketplace, those do have crossplay, or Play Anywhere I think it's called, where you can just jump into your save on the Xbox and then decide to play on PC, and that works great. However, if you're playing on Xbox or the Games for Windows PC version, you cannot play with somebody who's playing on the Steam version, which sadly is exactly what happened to me and another friend who I got sucked into Palworld yesterday, where we had a third friend who we really wanted to play with, but sadly they got the Steam version, and then we found out, oh, these games actually can't connect and we can't play with you because we were on Game Pass and they were on Steam. And personally, I've been bouncing between playing it on the PC, Xbox, or streaming it to the Steam Deck via Game Pass, but it kinda sucks to know that even though I've already made a decent amount of progress in my own world, that I'd basically just have to buy another copy of the game on Steam and start over if I wanted to play with my friends over there. So again, really hoping that they smooth this process out and there's better compatibility between the Steam versions and the Xbox/Windows games versions. Beyond multiplayer concerns, I'm also a little worried about the endgame of Palworld. If you scroll through the entire tech tree, you can kind of see where the progression's going to take you and just how wild Palworld gets at the higher levels. But my concern is that once you actually reach those higher levels or max out, and you actually can get access to everything that you can do with the bases and all the different pals that you've captured, will there be enough endgame content to keep you interested for hundreds or thousands of hours one day? Because personally, I really hope that's where they go with the game, because this seems like the kind of game that could be a forever sort of game that you just continue to have fun with pretty much endlessly. Now, maybe that's not the vision that the devs have for this game, but honestly I've just had so much fun running around and exploring just a fraction of what looks to be a very large map that I'm really hoping it could go on for a really long time, or at least inspire Nintendo to take Pokemon to greater heights whenever that Switch successor finally comes out. And speaking of Nintendo, I have to mention this at least a little bit, that I am concerned for the future of the game from a legal perspective, because boy howdy, they sure did lift a lot of stuff from Nintendo. Now this has already been covered by a lot of other creators out there, but I gotta say, a lot of the pals you can capture really do look suspiciously like original Pokemon, just slightly removed. And beyond Pokemon, I'd say that Palworld lifts at least as much from modern Zelda games as it does Pokemon, complete with eerily similar piano riffs that play whenever you jump into combat, or the extremely familiar stamina meter whenever you're climbing. Although to be fair, that was a really good idea to take from Nintendo, considering Breath of the Wild's verticality was one of its biggest draws from an exploration standpoint. Now obviously as a game in early access/preview mode, this is going to have some rough edges, and you can definitely see that in some of the wonky animations and unfinished textures here and there. But to be fair, I've seen a lot of early access titles that ask for more of my money and provide a lot less polish than what we're getting here, and considering the fact that it's already sold 5 million copies, I'm assuming the devs probably have a little bit of dough to play with if they want to make refinements to what's already on offer. And I really hope they do, because even if it's not perfect out of the gate, it sure does lay an incredible foundation for what this could be, and honestly, I hope Nintendo is taking notes, assuming they haven't already, sicked their legal team on the developers for Palworld. But hey, that's just one guy's opinion. What about you? Have you already played Palworld? And if so, what has your time with the game been like so far? Have you enjoyed it? Have you found it to be more jank than other early access titles that you played? Please let me know in the comments below, because I would love to hear your feedback. As always, thanks so much for taking the time to watch videos here on the channel. It means a ton to me. Take care, and I'll see you on the next one.